Nate, you're here in person.
I am. I got the movie.
Wow, you look really cool, actually.
Very cool.
Were you tackled by any girls on your way here?
Plenty.
Okay.
Too much for me to handle.
So, full transparency, we have been messing with this recording for, what, do you think, half an hour?
More, probably like 45 minutes.
Because there's been background noise, so we got rid of as much as possible. If there's a little bit, sorry, the setup's not perfect. We'll fix it over time, basically. But today we wanted to actually take a minute, well, a few minutes, I suppose, to review one of my favorite franchises. I mean, we're just actually going to do the one movie. The first X-Men.
This is the whole franchise.
That's the whole franchise. Well, I think we will review the other ones over time. Wow, so cool.
Taking that off there.
Very awesome. Dude, this is your first time on the actual channel. I mean, I guess we recorded this before and it didn't work. How does it feel?
Feels pretty terrible.
Does it?
Yeah.
Do you feel like perhaps maybe below where the camera's aimed, I perhaps have a gun to you?
A little bit.
Okay, interesting.
It also feels bad because I know after this video I'm going to be super famous.
That's true. That's very true.
I won't even be able to leave my house.
That's very likely true.
Everyone will just be like, hey, that's Nate.
Luckily, we have the masks, so...
That's true, yeah.
So, I want to start out, by the way, by saying that I grew up with these movies. This was sort of my MCU before there was one, in a way. It was like this connected franchise of different movies. I suppose it was only about 3 in or so when they started the MCU. But the MCU itself didn't really become the MCU until we got Iron Man 2, I would say.
Yeah, because that was the first one where they introduced other characters.
Pretty much, yeah.
So
I mean, because you had Nick Fury and all these other characters. So the MCU was a little later than this. I would say that this is the movie that saved superhero movies. I know it's a big statement.
That is a big statement because you're also forgetting the great Fantastic Four movies.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, the thing is, before this, there weren't that many serious superhero movies during the 90s. A lot of them kind of fell flat, or they were things like Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of faith lost in these. But when 2000 came around and we got X-Men from Fox, it really sort of reinvigorated the superhero franchises. I mean, after this, we would see the Raimi Spider-Man movies. We'd see Infinite Sony takes on Spider-Man. We'd see the MCU. Fantastic Four, and Four-Stick, and all the independent movies that would come from that as well. I mean, this movie is very dark. It opens with the Holocaust. Okay, so like...
It's a nice way to open.
I mean, it's like really dark. Like, it's uncomfortable.
You can't get any more dark than that.
Not really, no. I mean, unless you're going like Serbian film with what you're making. Yeah. Like, you're not going to get much more brutal. I mean, it starts with Magneto and Eric. He's actually in the Holocaust in, I believe, Auschwitz itself.
Yeah, he is in Auschwitz.
Is where it starts, the death camp. And he's separated from his parents, and then he tries to reach out towards them, and he pulls the gate down, which is a really cool scene. Yeah. Until like a soldier comes up and smacks him over the head and knocks him out. And you'll see more of those events in a different movie, as well, of like what happened to him. But this movie immediately establishes Eric Magneto as this sympathetic villain.
Yeah, and you actually begin to understand his standpoint and where he's coming from, why he believes what he believes, and that's kind of the best kind of villain.
Yeah,
is one that you actually understand. He's not just a villain because he's a villain. He's a villain that actually has a purpose and a reason to be there, a backstory, and something that actually makes you as the viewer go, huh. Yeah, I get that. I understand.
Well, and he points that out, too, when he talks to Charles in the beginning, and he's talking to him about, I've seen this all before.
Yeah.
Because the idea is that he's kind of becoming an old man at this point, and he lived through the suffering of World War II.
Right.
And what his people went through. And now he's seeing the potential for that again. The idea of we need to register mutants, round up mutants. There's a lot of government stuff in this, too.
Yeah.
And this is very race-based, in a way. I mean, it's very clearly an analogy for racism. X-Men has always been. Yeah. And I was impressed Fox was willing to go in on that without making it cringe.
Yeah, because most of the time that stuff is very cringy, like you said.
Well, it's hard to address without becoming basically a preacher on one side or the other. It's like when you see that addressed in movies, a lot of times it's like, see, that's why you should have empathy. And it's like, well, yeah, everybody's seen that message 100 times. It has not resonated with douchey people.
Right.
It's not working. And then you see the other side of it where it's like, well, it's not that big of a deal. It's like, oh, so we're just going to ignore everything. But like X-Men is able to sort of get in there and show like a group of mutants who want to side with the humans and at the same time protect their own kind against sort of a more extremist group, which is Magneto's Brotherhood of Mutants.
Yeah, and that's something that X-Men has always done.
Yeah.
As a, like in the comics, movies, shows, whatever. That's kind of one of the basis of the show or the universe is racism.
Yeah.
And not racism as in skin color, but racism as in you have the mutants who are by the normal people seen as like these outcasts, unhuman, whatever. But then you have the mutants who are just fighting for their lives.
Yeah.
And then eventually it gets out of hand. I know you see this a little bit later in the Fox universe where it gets actually out of hand.
Yeah, like ridiculous out of hand. I mean, the thing is, like, we don't want to get too far into spoilers because we will talk about some of the stuff that happened in this movie.
Right.
And possibly mention some future things, but since we want to review those, but especially we will say by the time of Days of Future Past and the events of The Wolverine, like things are getting really sketchy because of things that happen throughout the franchise. You do see that.
It gets way too far.
Well, yeah, like Magneto's concerns are very justified at a certain point. And it's weird how you have these two opposing, clashing forces between, not to just make this whole thing a Magneto character study, but you have Magneto who lived through the Holocaust, and then you have Xavier who kind of grew up a little bit of a privileged rich life in a way, but also he didn't connect very well to others because of his abilities. Like, so he still had some of those same problems. So you have the hopeful, you have the hopeful one of like, hey, I lived integrated in this world. We can make a good place for mutants and we can make this world a better place for mutants who can defend humans.
Make mutants great again.
Yeah. Well, that's what Magneto wants in a way. But that's the thing is you have that hope versus that despair and like cynicism, and how those two like push up against each other, and you can tell immediately that these two are friends. I think part of it that helps is they've become friends in real life as well. The chemistry between Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart is unreal. The same with like the chemistry between Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart.
The hugest of Jackmans.
Hugh Jackman is amazing in this. I mean,
he's awesome.
He comes in, he totally brings the Wolverine to life. From the first time you see him in the cage match going up against somebody, you see this character who has no hope, nothing. And one of the things my mom pointed out, because I've been watching these movies with her actually too. Nerd. She never saw him. Yeah, I like my mother. I spend time with my parents.
Wow.
Unlike some people who hate their parents. No, so something she points out is that like Wolverine has an insane character arc over the course of these movies.
Yeah,
he's not really talked about, but it's a lot like RDJ in terms of the Iron Man character growth.
Right.
Going from this selfish jerk
who
has nothing to live for, to like this more noble, I mean, he's still gruff, but like a more noble hero in a lot of ways, but also a hero that's willing to do what needs to be done.
Well, yeah, and
kills a lot of
even
people.
His growth throughout the other movies too, not just this one.
Yeah.
Because he even grows even further into X3, where he's even willing to... Well, actually, I'm not going to spoil it, but he's willing to basically give up
everything.
He's literally giving up everything to save the world.
Yeah.
That is not something that Logan would have done at the very beginning of this movie.
No, absolutely not.
He's very into himself. And that's actually one of the I was going to say goodest.
Well, hey,
one of the best things about Logan is you can see his growth.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing how well they do that. I mean, it's interesting because this movie is in a way a coming of age story for like the mutants themselves, right? I mean, it's like you have the teenagers and it's sort of like this rite of passage of like almost becoming adults in a way. But Logan has the same thing. Yeah, he's kind of childish at the beginning, despite how old he is.
Yeah, he's like 200 years old.
Yeah, but he acts like a child.
Right.
He's entitled, he's bitter, he's cynical, he's angry, he acts like an animal and embraces it. And by the end, you've sort of seen that caged a little bit in terms of him becoming this other character, which is fantastic. I think that there are things in this movie that didn't age well. And Nate has the script down here. We had to turn the computer off because the fan is so dang loud. But regardless, so if I miss anything that we were going to talk about, please bring it up. But
our fans are really loud.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really annoying.
They're outside. No, so the CGI in this movie is bad.
Yeah, it's not as bad as in Origins.
No, absolutely not.
Bad.
The claws look fine.
Yeah.
And I think they're somewhat CGI'd, but also practical.
Yeah.
Because they used practical claws throughout almost all the movies, and the way you can tell is it failed in Origins because they tried to go full CGI.
Yeah.
Looks horrid.
They look bad.
They actually look pretty good in this, his claws. That you can possibly tell that they're a little fake, but whatever. The things that didn't work sometimes were some of the Mystique things. Like,
Yeah.
they aged a little weird.
Yeah, or like changing and
Yeah, like some of it looks good.
yeah.
When she actually changes into someone else, it looks good. But things like when she's in the air and stuff like that look really fake. And also the battle on top of the Statue of Liberty between Sabretooth and Wolverine. Like when Wolverine falls, and there's a point in the movie where Wolverine falls, he extends his claws and they reach around and he wraps around one of the Statue of Liberty's crown spikes. I don't know what you call it.
Crown spikes.
I don't
That's what
know,
they're
man.
called.
I don't know. And he comes back up. Things like that are a little dated, but at the same time, it's not really a big deal. There's nothing here that pulls you out of the movie.
Yeah, it looks good for a 2000 movie.
Yeah, I can still watch it and not complain.
Right.
It's like, it'd be a little disingenuous to pretend it looks cutting edge.
Right.
But it doesn't look bad, which I think is worth saying.
It's not like bad CGI and like Jedi rocks in episode 6.
No. Well, and I think it does help that a lot of it was practical.
Yeah.
You know, and people in suits and stuff like that. I think that this really showed, too, that that's the way to go. I mean, there's characters you can't do that for, like Mystique.
Right.
What are you going to do? Like, rip her skin off and, like, put somebody else's skin on her, claymation or something?
Yeah, and
that's not going to
enter
happen.
the chat.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't know. I think that, though, is really important to point out that most of the stuff in this movie aged well.
Some other things that did not age very well is some of the lines.
Yeah. Storm.
Yeah, it's like the worst superhero line
What do you
I have
get
ever heard.
when a toad is struck by lightning? Or no, what happens when a toad is struck by lightning? The same thing that happens to anything else.
Like, whoa!
Whoa, we gotta have fortune cookie here.
George Lucas writing the lyrics for this.
That was really bad, I think, too. But there was a lot of charm here, too. So one thing that I think you want to talk about is Cyclops a little bit. We don't want to go too far, but I think this movie, Until Apocalypse, did Cyclops the best.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, yeah, Until Apocalypse, Cyclops is actually good. In X2 and X3, I won't get into much, but he is terrible in those movies.
Yeah, he's sidelined. And look
Absolutely
at this.
awful.
We've got the goggles, okay? You cannot dispute this opinion.
Yeah, exactly. We are Cyclops fans.
If you dispute this opinion, I'll shoot you. And what happens, like through the goggles, hypothetically, and what will happen is I will shoot through my normal glasses. The glass will break and shatter my corneas. Regardless, I'm willing to do that.
Yeah,
then it'll come
and do you
out
know
here.
what happens to humans when they get shot by a Cyclops goggles? The same thing that happens to anyone else.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Whoa.
Yeah, that stuff's weird. Who was it? James Marsden?
Yeah, James Marsden. He played Cyclops so good.
Yeah.
And actually the guy from Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix, I actually like better than James Marsden. I don't remember his name, but he's the guy from Ready Player One. He played such a good Cyclops. But anyways, James Marsden was really good.
Yeah.
And I feel like he was very underrated as Cyclops.
Well, because people just see Cyclops as a jerk because of some of the things he's done in the comics.
Yeah, he is kind of a douchebag.
But he worked here.
He worked in X-Men.
And he's not unkind.
Right.
In these movies, he's a lot nicer of a guy.
Well, and the other thing is, he only could be seen as unkind because Hugh Jackman is stealing his girl.
Yeah.
So what guy is not going to be angry?
Right. Yeah,
So
I get
it's
that.
like-
There is a friction between Wolverine
The
and...
hugest of Ackmans.
The hugest of Ackmans and John Marston.
Right. So, so he played the part really well.
Yeah.
He got down the character. In X2 and X3, it was so disappointing as a huge Cyclops fan like myself.
And I like him too.
It's very, very disappointing.
Well, he was sidelined both movies.
Yeah, especially in X3.
And then you can really tell that this became the Wolverine franchise in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it was like Wolverine and the X-Men.
I still love, but it only became something else at Apocalypse. So like the last two movies were really focused on the X-Men without him.
Yeah.
Which I won't get into too much after, huge, like the largest J. Ackman.
Yeah, the largest J. Ackman.
Yeah, when he actually stepped away from the role.
Right.
That's kind of when it became more about the X-Men. And obviously he does cameo, though, in Apocalypse.
Yeah, and speaking of Hugh Jackman, he is so iconic as Wolverine.
Yeah.
He is probably like in the top 3 or 5 at least most iconic superhero parts.
Oh, yeah.
There's him as Wolverine. I'd say RDJ as Iron Man. Chris Evans as Captain America.
I would put
Chris Hemsworth as Thor is pretty iconic.
Toby, I think, is up there. I know there's arguments over Toby's character, but he is iconic.
He's very iconic.
Movies. Those 5 are kind of the core.
Yeah, and it is a shame that he had to step down, but the guy was in like his 50s.
And he did so much for this
right.
role. He brought this character to life. And his swan
so
song with Logan is incredible. This is a movie that I really do recommend you check out if you haven't seen it. I think it aged very well. I think that the X-Men on their own are a very mature take for superheroes. It's very dark. It's very gritty. And that doesn't make something good, but I think that the subject material they tackled had to be that.
Right.
You know, you couldn't have it be like, oh, hey, Magneto, I heard you survived World War II.
Whoa,
hey, that's pretty fun, right? It's
got
like
out of Auschwitz.
You can't really do that because it's very disingenuous.
Right.
So, like, you couldn't have a happy-go-lucky
right.
attitude with this. So I think that you had to go in that direction. And I do think that there is a lot of hope to be found in this movie and other movies in this franchise about reconciling differences and mainly the growth of a character, of especially Wolverine, the idea that it's never too late to become better.
I would just say, check this movie out. I mean, it's been out for 20 years now.
Yeah,
so if you haven't watched this, go watch it. Like,
yeah, it's very cheap
and watch the other ones too.
Yeah.
Because they're all pretty good. I'd say only like two movies in this entire franchise are arguably bad.
Yeah.
And then there's one that's not good. But it's not really bad.
No, yeah, and out of everything, that's pretty crazy. But hey, let us know what you think in the comments down below. Are you a fan of the Fox X-Men universe? What are your thoughts? The next one we would be reviewing is probably one of my top 3 favorites in the franchise, X2. So there's a lot of great stuff in here. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Be sure to check out all the links as always. We got the social medias, Patreon, where you can help the channel if you feel inclined to. We do appreciate it. And we also have, obviously, the new Let's Play channel, which is becoming less and less new, where Nate and I play through a lot of different games and have a good time and tease there too. And we'll see you later. I should probably end this. Here, I'm gonna send a message to them so they have to subscribe. Just a second. I'm tapping into my inner Professor X.
I'm getting the message to go subscribe to a channel.